Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Call to Adventure Pod with me, George B. So Ben is a personal trainer and MNU certified evidence-based nutritionist. He served in the British Army for 7 years, was deployed to Afghanistan, won international military competitions, and has led climbing and mountain expeditions around the world in a number of different countries from the Himalayas to South Africa. And Ben is now the head coach at IndieFit in Shropshire. So we'll touch on a few of these during the episode, but just a few adventure highlights that Ben's completed. So 2016, 5 times ultra marathons in one season with a 25k rucksack. 2017, Glencoe Sky Race Extreme Series ultra marathon. 2018, solo bike pack. 3,373 kilometers around Iceland in 28 days, nearly there. 2018, 16 marathons, 16 days, and 16 national parks in the UK. And 2021, he attempted the Cape Wrath Trail fastest known time. So without further ado, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. What an introduction.
Well, yeah, it's the perfect stuff that we like to see for the Call to Adventure podcast. So yeah, we'll dig on into it. But before we do, always kick off with how we connected. So ours is we were chatting a little bit before the episode, and it's very fortuitous and serendipitous. So Steph, our content manager, she searches around for weird and wonderful podcast guests in the world of the internet, and she came across you and said that it looked very interesting what you've been up to. And then it turns out we both live in Shropshire. And do you actually live in Shrewsbury as well?
I am in Frankwell, just across the Welsh Bridge, so yes, indeed.
Very nice. I am just up the hill in Radbrook right now, so if I lean out my window, I can probably see you.
We should have done this by smoke signal.
We should have, yeah. That would have been ideal. I'd just hold up the questions, and you can just write your response. That would have been wonderful. But no, it will be nice to actually be able to connect afterwards, and we'll have to go out and do some mountaineering and climbing stuff that we'll get into. And yeah, I have seen some of your, when I was having a little look before the podcast, I was looking at some of your morning sessions that look really, really cool. So I'm going to have to get myself down to one of those.
Absolutely. You'd be more than welcome.
Sounds good. So we normally then do a little bit of quick fire. So given that you're into climbing, very quickly, sport or trad?
Trad is rad. Trad always.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Why is that? You just like the mental side of it?
Trad's what it's all about. Trad is the adventure. Don't get me wrong, I like sport climbing, and there's a time and a place, but when you can clip everything onto your harness, and you can get your ropes, and you can go with a mate, and then off you go, and you can just work in perfect tandem, swapping leads one after the other. I just find it the smoothest and just most accomplishing, if that's a word, way of getting through the mountains. It gives you a real sense of adventure.
Yeah, you can see why, I don't know who is it, the French that call it adventure climbing, because it definitely does have that side to it, doesn't it? Favorite bit of climbing gear? If you're into trad, then I know that you're going to have at least a favorite bit of gear or some gear that you're very, very fond of.
I mean, everybody loves a big cam. You got to have your big blue and finding ways of using it. But I think my favorite is I have a small blue offset, which I have fallen on many times, and it has never budged. And I don't use it anymore because I've kind of ground it up a little bit now since I've taken quite a few falls on it, and I think it's time for it to retire. But I tend to keep it on me for luck, because when I've tried to really push my climbing grade or go onto a bit of a gnarly route, and that one has been used, and I've come off on lead or whatever, that's always been the one that's held its place perfectly. Now, you could say that's down to perfect placement, of course, but that bit of kit certainly has some luck to it.
Yeah, it adds such a different dimension. I've mainly sport climbed, done a little bit of trad that I'm starting to get into now, and I can see how it has it's like that extra dimension, isn't it? It's like the little bit more engrossing. Sport can feel very engrossing if you're a bit scared of falling off and it's quite run out, and then you really feel like I need to concentrate here. There's no room for thinking about other things. But then trad, the very little bit that I've done, it takes out that kind of last 2% of margin that you would have had for thinking about other stuff, to where you are just 100% engaged, just thinking like, I have to really be with this, otherwise potential bad times. We did see a guy hit the deck last week, actually, and that was very eye-opening. Three
Yeah.
pieces of gear put in, fell out, hit the floor, was slowed down on the way. It was actually a Pothole Quarry. Have you ever climbed there? Seeing as you're,
Really? Wow.
yeah. Do you know Pothole Quarry?
I do indeed, yes. Oh, I mean, it's been a while since I've climbed there. I think I climbed there when I was a kid, but yeah, wow.
Yeah,
It's always eye-opening though when you see gear rip out and you have that sort of heart-stopping moment of that ever such split second where you think it's going to hold and then ping, it just comes out, and it's a little heart-stopping to watch, let alone experience.
scary stuff. I don't know if you've clocked this yet, but as we're talking, I seem to remember that we actually have met before. Does that ring a bell? I seem to remember that, and now that I've actually seen your face and started talking to you a little bit more, the cogs have been turning, and I think we met in Fort William. I think we were at a dinner together. I think you were there. Maybe it's not you. I'm going to go for a stab in the dark. I think
Go for it.
you were there with your girlfriend, and you were thinking about doing the Cape Wrath trail run. And were you in Ben? Were you around Fort William? Did you used to live near Fort William?
Yeah, I lived in Inverlochie. So hang on a minute, where did we go? Was this at the
It was near Christmas time. I think it was Friday. I'm trying to think who I was there with. I think you were a friend of the mutual friend. I don't know if it was. Do you know? I'm trying to think. It was it a guy called Callum from Snowdonia. Is he the link?
Oh my goodness me. I can think I can see when
The
we met, because it would have been at the
it,
Garrison West at the pub, wouldn't it?
yeah, and it had like
I think.
lots of silvery and coppery things around the bar, and then
Yes.
we sat on a table of 4, and there was you and your girlfriend and me and somebody else, but I can't think who it was.
Oh my goodness, who else was it?
Even weirder. Well,
Oh, that is odd. What a strange. And we've ended up living in the same town together.
yeah. How how, how did you end up here in Shrews?
Oh man, that's really distracted me now. That's such a strange story. I love that. That's amazing. I'm really embarrassed that I don't reckon. You've got a little bit of a fuzzy camera on this one, because I think I'm on your camera, thingy camera. But if we meet up after, we're going to have to piece this jigsaw together,
Yeah.
because I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
This world can be so small sometimes.
It's crazy, isn't it? I used to have very long hair, so I had hair down to here when I met you. I was probably boring you about my cycle touring trip stories.
You weren't doing a photo shoot, were you?
Yeah. So we were doing the Ben Nevis Intro to Mountaineering course with my company, Call to Adventure, and we were going to go and do some media.
Oh my God, I remember it. Yes, who were we with? That's going to, halfway through this podcast, I'm going to just shout out a name, and it's all going to come flooding back. But I remember that because I remember you saying that you were doing the photo shoot. And yeah, I was with Laura, and we went out for dinner, and I can't remember who we were with. But wow, what a small world! What a crazy small world!
Yeah, the link will come. So how did you end up here after living up there?
Well, I think when I left the army in 2018, and during the time when I left the army, I was in there since I was about 17, so I'd known nothing else really. So I was a bit like a spaniel being let off the lead when I first left the army, and I knew I needed to go to Scotland, and I had this wonderful journey of living in the back of my car, training to go and cycle around Iceland, doing loads of climbing. I worked as a mountain guide, ice climbing instructor, and lots of bits and pieces there, and had this wonderful time. And then when I met Laura, we kind of started to settle down a little bit. And then, of course, when 2020 hit and all of the COVID lockdown started, life just became a little bit more difficult. And it was, don't get me wrong, it was a wonderful lockdown, if I can say that. I think we were very fortunate in Fort William that it didn't really feel like anything had happened. And it was sunny and it was amazing. And, I feel very fortunate about that. But we also both ended up being made redundant, and our accommodation ended because we were living with someone at the time, and they were like, kind of need my house back, and it's completely fine, and it was pretty much run its course. But we were still in lockdown, and this was lockdown number 1, so we were frantically trying to search for a house anywhere, and there's nowhere to rent around Fort William. There is just nowhere. And we thought, well, Shrewsbury is quite nice, and we did want to move further south, to be closer to people and kind of get that little bit of connection and a bit of a social life going. And we thought it'd be easier for jobs and things. So we thought, well, Shrewsbury's quite nice. Laura liked it. I never thought I'd ever move back because I grew up here. But here we are. And then I found this one house. And I was like, what do you think of this? And Laura was like, okay. And I was like, well, we can do a virtual tour of it. And this person's just wandering around with their iPhone doing a video. And we thought, should we get it? So I messaged the landowner and said, look, I know it's a bit of a risk, us coming down. We don't have jobs, but, I was in the army. I did this. I'm probably going to join the reserves, X, Y, and Z. I bent the truth a little bit. And then we got the house. And literally the day that lockdown was called off, we put all of our lives into the back of my car, into the back of Laura's car, drove down, moved into the house that day. And yeah, it was a crazy, crazy journey. And it's been great moving here. It's really nice living in town. But we're getting that sort of itchy feet to get back to the mountains again. We're still looking at houses around Loch Ness and everywhere else now. So I think there's going to be a time where we return back up the north.
Yeah. So how did you mentioned that you kind of done some mountain guiding, some ice climbing. How did you actually get into all of that stuff?
That would be the good old British Army, that was. So when I was a kid, I was an Army cadet. Before that, I was a scout. Before that, I was in the Beavers and the Cubs and everything, to the point where my mum and dad used to call me Ray Mears or Indiana Jones, and then my brother linked it together to get the rather lame sounding Ray Jones was my name. I just run around in the hills because I don't know if you know Shropshire particularly well, but we were on Brownclea. That's pretty much where we lived, on Brownclea Hill. So we had woods a couple of miles behind the house. So I would always be there adventuring around, trying to camp, build shelters. I got my SAS survival guide. I went out where I went, the dog went, and we just did stuff. I drank out of rivers. I made myself horrendously ill. I tried to catch things. I failed, and just had this conditioning from a kid that then lent on to me joining the army. And as soon as I joined the army, I got into adventure training because I got a bit of a taste for that in the cadets, and I thought I need more of that. And the adventure ball started rolling again. And then I became quite good at it and got my mountain leader, got my climbing instructor, and various qualifications are transferable from the army to civilian life, and some aren't. And then the army will have more qualifications for you to step through. So you get more progression in your career, as it were. And I pretty much got to the top of those qualifications, which meant that I could just run expeditions places and do things, which meant that I just got into it, and I absolutely loved it. And then kind of steered away from climbing for a little bit until I got a one of two places with a British mountain guide, just to do a dope on a rope, as it were, really, for this guide to pass his assessment. So these are British mountain guides, top of the game. They've taken 10, 15, 20 years to get here. Leagues and leagues and leagues ahead of me. And it was just so great to see someone flowing through the mountains with two dopes on a rope behind them, scrambling around North Wales. And I thought, this is really good. And then we got a lot more time with Kev over the time and did more climbing. And I thought, I can really get into this. So it kind of transcended then from a bit of hobby climbing and mountaineering to actual climbing, getting into trad, really taking it further, progressing through my qualifications. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then when I left the army, the point of me leaving my career saw me leading expeditions across the world, doing as much as I possibly could pack in. And then when I went and became a civilian, when I left the army, it was a case of, right, well, I've got some skills. We'll see what I can use. So I partnered then with West Coast Mountain Guides, started doing some work with them, did my own things really, and just sort of I kind of had a bit of an affinity then, which I'm sure we'll go on to later on in this chat, about just creating challenges and just going off and doing them, and quite liked the solo aspect of getting out in the hills and just, I guess, not really relying on climbing partners. I'm not the most social person in the world, so it was quite difficult to get climbing partners and stuff when I just wanted to go and do objective after objective after objective. So I just started doing solo climbs and solo scrambles and just cracking on and doing what I could do, and then finding that sweet middle ground of scrambles that I can manage on my own without ropes or anything like that, and then very easy climbs that I can manage on my own that kind of I can stitch together into big ridges, big hill days, and the rest of it. So it's kind of all stemmed from a foundation from a kid, and then emphasized through my time in the army, and then spat me out at the other end with quite a good balance of things, I think.
Very cool. I also grew up here, so I feel like we must have been two kindred spirits running around,
Oh my goodness me.
trying to learn all our adventure-y things. And I think as a lot of kids are, just Raimi as fanatic. I'm sure we probably passed each other on a few of the hills around here, around Stretton or somewhere.
We must have done.
So thinking about your climbing, so you mentioned that afterwards you kind of got into these adventures, some that I mentioned before, the kind of solo stuff. But are there any climbing expeditions that you look back? Which one do you look back most fondly on?
There was one where we went to the Himalayas, and I was in the Army Mountaineering Association, and we had our 60th anniversary as being an association, and we did a celebratory expedition, and I managed to get onto that expedition. Now, I was leading half the team. The team was split into two halves because it was quite a big team. I was leading half the team, we had someone else leading the other half of the team, and then we kind of all had our various roles and responsibilities, be it logistics or whatever. And we went with the objective of climbing Puthahayanchuli, which is one of the mountains in the Dhaulagiri range. Now, it's 7,200 meters, so it's quite a punchy hill. You definitely have altitude. And it was just, because it was such a long expedition, I think it was a good 21, 22 days out and about, of actual underfoot. So we were in country for about 4 weeks actually. And because I was also reading a book at the time called White Mountain, which is legends and true stories of journeys through the Himalaya while we were journeying through the Himalaya, it kind of made it into this crazy immersive experience. And it was brilliant, going to altitude. I'd never been to such high altitude before, so I wanted to see what my body could do. We were around amazing culture of very, very rural Nepal, and trying to learn the language as well and talk to the Sherpas and get to know everybody and everything else. And I think in terms of just feeling a real sense of what I look for in an adventure, I remember back to those days on that expedition. Now, there are days where the psychological aspect of big groups is amazing because you go through a process called form, norm, storm, and perform. So you form together as a group, and then everybody gets together because they're all new, and it's all like, oh, hello, everybody, and you understand how they're getting on. Now you find out what the norm is. So you go from form to norm, and you settle into a routine. Then you go through a storm, which means that factions in the group start to gather, and you kind of get this group over here and this group over here, and then there's some sort of conflict, and then you get to the perform element where the conflict overcomes itself, and then you end up performing really well as a team. We went through that textbook A to Z from one page to the last page, and at times it was a bit tedious, but I would just take myself off, and you just go and sit on the edge of the campsite, and you've got unfathomably vast mountains that just start from right in front of you and go vertically up, and you just sat at the base of them and really finding a true sense of peace and adventure in this place. And you're there for long enough for it to really sink in. Some of the adventures nowadays are 7 days or a weekend or this, that, and the other, but to be there for a truly long time is a really memorable experience. So I guess, going to the Himalayas was probably my most memorable mountain experience. But my overall most memorable adventure experience would be my trip around Iceland, which was, to this day, the best experience of my entire life.
Well, I want to hear about Iceland now. Come on then.
How long have you got?
So this is bikepacking, right?
So Iceland I needed a challenge. I wanted a challenge to celebrate leaving the army. It was going to be my final year in the army because it takes a year. For those who don't know, you sign off on the dotted line and you do your 7 clicks to freedom, as they call it. And then it takes a year then for you to be processed, go through that notice period, I guess you could call it, until the day you can actually leave. If you're savvy enough, you can save leave from the previous year, add it to the next leave year, and you've got loads of time off being paid, but you're not in the army. So you use it for your resettlement, adapting to a different way of life. You get loads of different leave allowances. So I ended up having about 6 months paid without having to be at work, which was amazing. So I thought, I've got to have a proper adventure. I've got to do something. I need to do something big. And all of my challenges, as you listed at the start of this, kind of built up to a crescendo of doing something bigger. And I thought, I want to do something on a bike. And I thought, I really want to go to Iceland. So I got an Iceland map on Amazon. And then the next day I was like, I wonder if we could go around the country. And then I Googled it, and then I found out that every person and their dog has been around the ring road. And I was like, oh, that's a bit boring. I don't really want to ride the ring road, because it's a bit like riding the M25. And now, having been there, I'm so glad I didn't do that, because it's a horrendous road. So I thought, well, let's create a different way. And I'll go all the way along the outside of the country, all the way into the Central Highlands. And then I don't want to miss a single site. And let's see if we can stitch it together into one whole trail. Now, at the time, I thought we could turn this into the Iceland National Trail. And I got in touch with the National Tourist Board, and I thought, let's create this trail. Let's see what we can do. And I want to see if I can officialize it somehow. So it was probably the biggest challenge where I've tried to create something with legacy rather than just going off and doing something. I wanted somebody to find this route, download the GPX, put it on their watch or their GPS device, and then go off and do the Iceland National Trail, whether they do section 1, whether they do section 1 to 30, whatever it is. So I created this trail, and in my naivety at the time, the logistics didn't really work. The organization of the National Trail didn't really work. And I've actually, since having come back, rejigged it, renamed it, got back in touch with the Iceland Tourist Board, and now actually have a guidebook that I'm processing at the moment, because I'm going back next year to go and do the same trail. And I went to Iceland completely in my naivety, with my bike bag that I borrowed from a bike shop, with all the stuff, far too much kit, budget blown, and then that budget was about to get obliterated with the price of things in Iceland. And I booked my campsite, and I got to Reykjavik, and I thought, well, I'm here now. So I went to Domino's Pizza and then planned my route. And I thought, right, well, I guess I'll give myself a day to just chill and sort of make sure I've got maps and gas and this, that, and the other. And then the next day I'll go. And then I think I can get round all 3,500 kilometers or so in a month. And let's make it a challenge. Let's see if I can do an average of between 100 and 200 kilometers per day, every single day for 28 days, and let's see how far we can do. And as we went through the whole thing, I managed to get the job done in about 21 days. It was a real eye-opener in terms of a challenge of such vastness, the biggest thing I'd ever done, but also how to push myself on zero food, because it was so expensive. And I'm talking a bell pepper, some equivalent of pasta and sauce that you would boil, a carton of blueberry juice, and maybe half a watermelon would cost in the realm of about 35 quid. If you do that every day, twice a day, for 21 days, budget was blown. My credit card took an absolute battering. And as much as it was expensive and the logistics was off and things really, really struggled in certain elements, there's one bit that I will never forget for as long as I live. And that was going around the West Fjords, which, if you can imagine the picture of Iceland, it's kind of the three fingers, if you like, that come out the northwest side of it. And it's in and out, fjord after fjord after fjord. And the road goes out to the tip of the fjord, all the way back in the other way, and then back out. So as you're cycling into a fjord, you can see the road you've got to take on the other side of this fjord. And I thought, this is going to be the most boring part of this route, because I'm going to be going in, and it's going to be soul destroying, because I'm going to be able to see the road coming out the other side and know how far I've got to go, because these fjords are huge. And I thought, this is going to be soul destroying. And I started on this bit, and as I'm going in and out of all these fjords, it was a beautiful, hot day. You know, you're only 50 miles or so from the Arctic Circle, but I was tanned. And I'm in my short sleeves, I'm in my shorts. I had all my kit packed on my bike, everything that I needed. I was completely self-sufficient on this absolute monster of a bike, and cycling along. And I just turned into each fjord, and every fjord had its own characteristics, it had its own views, it had its own personality, and you just get a full sense of what it smelt like, what it looked like. You'd see mountains in the distance that you've never seen before. You'd see a different sight that you've never seen. You'd see different bits of wildlife, different bits of flora and fauna. It'd be different tarmac. It would have different textures. You'd see no people. And then the water was completely still, like a complete mirror. And I was getting very tired at this point, and I was just about approaching my campsite because I'd kind of aimed to get to a hotel, and I thought, well, I can keep going a little bit because I've still got a good few hours of daylight. So I'll keep going and then have a longer rest station the next night. And I just camped on the side of the road, and I was really tired. And you're on the drops, and you're just plugging away with your legs, and your eyes are barely open, and you're just breathing. You're just focusing on nothing but breathing and legs. And then as I'm sort of pedaling away on this flat bit of road and this dime straight bit of road, I heard this huge sound next to me. And I was like, what on earth is that? And it was the blowhole of a breaching whale. I was like, that was really loud. So I sort of just turned around. And on other sites, I'd scrambled to get my phone because I had my phone on a little quad lock thing on my handlebars. So I was scrambling to get my phone to take a picture. In this instance, I knew that it would be over in an instant. So I just looked at it. And these humpback whales were just breaching out of the water. And I just remember, I don't understand how I didn't come off the road, but I'm just staring at this sight while my legs are still turning. And it was the most magical experience because then they kept breaching. And in my head, they were swimming with me as I was cycling to try and egg me on a little bit to just keep going, almost as if, this is going to sound really airy-fairy, but this is where I was, and my mind's gone back there now. It was as if Iceland was telling me to just keep pushing a little bit further, almost like when you choose to do something big, whether you think it's like Kevin Gorgeson says when he was climbing the Dawn Wall with Tommy Caldwell, and I'll never forget this quote. We never knew whether we were in the pursuit of something grand or doing something completely insane, or words to that effect. When you're in that environment, when you're in that mindset, the world has a way of doing things to just keep you going if you know you're on the right track. And I was absolutely hooked at this point. I was only 1,500, well, not even that. I think I was only 1,100 kilometers in at this point. And these whales, for a good 5 kilometers, just stayed with me. And if I'd stopped, they would have gone. If I'd got my phone out, they would have gone. So all I could do is just own that one particular moment with no people, no cars, no sights, no planes, no nothing. And just own that one moment with these group of 4 or 5 or however many humpback whales that were just breaching, and you'd hear the of their blowhole, and then you'd hear almost like an inhale, which I've never heard before in my life, after. And they were so close that as you look towards the water, they were 20 meters away, 30 meters, 20 meters, the length of a swimming pool away. And you could almost see them under the water. This is probably hallucinations, but it felt like you could see them under the water because you could see like white bits flowing under the water. And I thought it was them. And like I said, in my mind, they were with me and just keeping me going. And I just thought this is the most unbelievable moment of my entire life. And I got to where I was going to be staying for my campsite. They had gone at this point, and I pulled into the side of the road and I put my bike down. I sat on my bike on the floor, put my feet in the water, which was absolutely Baltic. And I just sort of sat there and absorbed that moment. And ever since then, I can't help but get emotional when I look back on all the little videos and things that I did when I went to Iceland, because it was my first massive, in my opinion, like in my view, massive adventure that I had entirely done on my own, entirely organized on my own, and it rewarded me with that. So that's why I'm going back next year to finish this guidebook. I think it'd be a really good guidebook. I think it'd be a really good little series of videos as well, because I want to align my mission to getting people to do stuff like that, because life is too short not to. There you go. There's Iceland in 8 minutes.
Well, you've certainly sold it. I've not actually been to Iceland. I've been lucky enough to go to quite a few places, but you certainly sold it. I'm really looking forward to going. I know I'm going to have to charge the bank account now before I go. I have heard that it's horribly expensive, but it does look incredible. And those I did live in Sweden for some time, and the wilderness, I think, is kind of similar. I think it's probably even a little bit more wild in Iceland, but it's very different to what we have in the UK, where I mean, Scotland is a little bit more wild, but we think of Lake District and maybe Snowdonia, but they're so small and still quite developed compared to some of the big outdoor places, the wilderness that they have there. So that experience sounds completely incredible, though, and I can see why you took that message. And I think that there's something also about we have this desire to get the phone out, to record it, to share it with others, to be able to look at it afterwards. But there's something about when you can't do that and you just have to be with the experience and very present, that makes it more magical. It's almost like a gift that you can't do that, even though you can't do the nice things of showing others and actually seeing a physical copy. Like you say, it's probably even more of a precious memory and experience because you couldn't, and all you had to do was experience it. So yeah, it's interesting how that happens.
I think it's good in the way that you can't record some things, because you then have the joy of reliving that moment every time you tell someone, and you can put your little stamp on it. Now, I could have just held my phone up to the screen and said, "Hey, watch this. There's some video of some humpback whales," and you've been like, "Thanks, Ben. That's really good." But I hope that to you and to anyone who's listening to this, I can portray that there are elements of adventures when we go out on a limb and do stuff that will really repay us, that are far more than just an Instagram post or a phone background. There are so many things to experience and so many things that you want to have that you can never record. You want to have that so that you can have that joy of reliving it. I'll never forget that, because I'll tell every single person I ever meet about those humpback whales. And every single time, the hairs will go up on my arms. I feel all tingly. I'll get a little lump in my throat, because it was viscerally impactful, if that's a term. It was huge, and just taking a picture of it just wouldn't have that would have been a fuzzy bit of fin. It would have looked like the Loch Ness monster, and it wouldn't have had the same effect to it. So I think it's great that you can have these elements that you can't record, because then you've
Yeah.
got to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch gears and think about training for these big expeditions. So your background and your kind of expertise now is in nutrition and training. So one thing that a lot of people ask me about, and that I think a lot about too, is as we get a little bit older, kind of into the 30s, and you don't recover quite as quickly, and you actually have to do a bit more self-care. People have often picked up a few injuries. I played rugby for a lot of years, then did mixed martial arts, so I've certainly got my fair share of them. But now, and it's held me back from doing some expedition stuff. And I went on a skiing trip in Sweden, and I put two big heavy bags, and Sweden's also pretty expensive. We'd gone up to fairly north to Åre for this weekend away, do some ski touring, and I had my backpack on and my girlfriend's backpack on, and I stepped off a really high platform, and I just twisted my knee, and I couldn't ski for the 4 days. And that kind of thing, when you're in your early 20s, you probably just wouldn't get injured. But after you've done a fair bit of sport and outdoor stuff, then you become a little bit more fragile unless you build this really resilient expedition body, which is what I want to ask you about. How should we be thinking about building a body that's ready for any adventure, where somebody can just give you a ring and say, I want to go and do whatever it is, whether it's some mountaineering or ski touring or climbing, or how do you build this resilient, adventure ready body? What are the high level approach and principles that you take?
I love that you've asked me that question, because that is exactly how I've tried to align my mission to help people. Now, my background now, my focus now is nutrition, fitness, and mental resilience. It is, as you said in the introduction, it's how can we build people to become more capable and more resilient for an adventure. And when I say adventure, I love people to try something new. I love people to have a goal that they can aim for. I will help weight loss clients. I have a lot of weight loss clients. I have people who just want to start getting fitter. I have people who just want to start doing something. But I will always encourage those people to find a goal in what it is that they're trying to do. And if I can facilitate that goal, be it through guided hill days, be it through just trying to push people to do something a little bit more than their comfort zone would like them to do, then this is the bread and butter. This is what I believe people should be aiming for when they're looking for, quote unquote, an adventure into their health, into their nutrition, into their fitness, and into what they see as possible. All of these challenges that I've done in the past have simply just been, some of them quite selfishly, just to see what I can do. I thought it would be a good idea, so we'll go off and do it. And as I'd gone through that and lived in those trenches, as it were, I'd understood specific adaptation to imposed demand, i.e. training specifically for what the goal is at hand. I'd understood how not to train, how not to fuel, very much how not to fuel, very much how not to train. I did every training program you could possibly think of, every diet you could possibly think of, because I didn't know what I was doing. And then when I got qualified and I started to really understand this, now my impact on the industry, on the world, if you like, my niche is getting people adventure ready. And that is, I don't want to say fit for life because it gets me a little bit cringy, but it is essentially what you've just said there. Being able to be fit, to be capable, to be healthy, to be fueled, and to be ready in the head when the weekend comes. You can get on a train, you can go to Fort William, you can climb Ben Nevis, and you come back again. It's when the weekend comes, you can go on a 100-mile bike ride. It's being able to it's being able to explore what you can do and having an adventure in that fitness and health. Now then, what are the underlying principles? Now, it's my bread and butter to talk about this as a nutritionist. The underlying principles of nutrition. The underlying principles of nutrition are much like the foundations for a house. Every house, strong house that you want to last, will always be built from from concrete and trenches. If you don't put your foundations down, you could have two houses, House A and House B, next to each other. House A has got trenches, concrete, footings, metal things, all sorts of stuff. House B could look completely identical, but it's just built on some flat ground. After a while, House A will still be standing while House B starts to have some cracks developing, some subsidence, and things are going to start crumbling. You can see where I'm going with this analogy. If you don't build your fundamental understanding and your actions on those foundations, it doesn't matter what your house looks like. It doesn't matter what your kitchen looks like. You need to build on those foundations in order to succeed. Now, it's my job to make those foundations the sexy thing that people want to learn, rather than what everybody sees and hears on social media, which is the next big thing, the next fad, the next quick thing, the next 60 seconds to this. It's my job to get people to dig trenches and fill them with concrete when everybody else just wants to design a kitchen. So when we look at how we can do this, we'll start with the physical preparation first. Strength is the foundation to everything. Whether you have only run and that's it for your training, whether you have only climbed, you are building a base level of strength. When we talk about strength, we're talking about building a robust and capable frame of a body. Think of it this way. If you wanted to go off-roading or a big overland adventure in a Land Rover, I'm a big Land Rover head with my past. I love Defenders. If you wanted to go on a big overland adventure, you would choose something with a sturdy metal chassis that's been reinforced with big metal things that you've bolted on, i.e. it's strong. You're going to put some big wheels on it. You're going to raise the suspension. You're making it more capable for that adventure. You're not going to hop in your Mini and put it through the same thing. Now, in that sense, what you're doing is you're building your body from potentially the state of that Mini to the state of an overland adventure vehicle, so that you are capable of dealing with whatever the ground and whatever your adventure throws at you. And that starts with building a base level of strength. And you can do that by going through compound movements. You're going squats, deadlifts, shoulder press, bench press, doing things like that. You are lifting heavy things off the ground. You are pressing things up above your head. You are moving your body weight, and you are moving heavy weights. The more you do that, the more you're going to build strength. A lot of people think that if they just do weight training, then they will get huge and buff and put on loads of bulk. But if that was the case, then anybody that looked at a gym would become super buff, and we'd have a huge gym bro centric population, which we don't. Building strength and size and mass takes years and years and years of conditioning. Now, the benefit that people have in terms of adhering to such a program is you'll get something called newbie gains, which is a very bro science kind of term. But it's essentially if you've got somebody who's never stepped foot in a gym before, or under a barbell before, or lifted a weight before, and you've got them to start doing that, they're going to adapt pretty fast. And that's good. You'll put on some functional muscle mass, which is essentially your body preparing and reacting to the stimulus that you're putting it under. As if that aforementioned mini, could all of a sudden put itself into bigger wheels or into a bigger chassis. It's simply adapting, and the body can do that. Nutritionally, we need to remember that 95% of us is a normal human being. That 5% of us, that's the adventurer, that's the athlete, that's the runner, that's the climber, that's the mountaineer, that's the cyclist. That's 5% of us. Because the vast majority of people listening to this podcast have got a job, they've got a dog, they've got kids, they've got partners, they've got friends, they've got social lives, they've got stuff going on in their life. We're not all professional adventurers, as much as that'd be amazing to just be Ross Edgley and get paid to be an absolute monster and go and swim around Great Britain. That'd be amazing. But the normal population of us, we're not that. So we need to remember, where can we make the simplest change to our overall health and strength to make us better for that 5% of us? And that's by addressing the 95%. And that, unfortunately, folks, is the unsexy eating fruits and vegetables, getting adequate protein, drinking enough water, sleeping well, and managing stress. If you can do all 5 of those things, and you're like, oh yeah, cheers, Ben, that's breakthrough, that's my clickbait title right there. If you can do those 5 things, you will improve your overall process of being that overland machine. When it comes to the strength side of life, we all know if we need to get fit that we need to do something. And if you say to anybody, if you take 10 people on Shrewsbury High Street now and say, you need to get fitter, so what are you going to do? Well, if they haven't got offended already, they'll probably turn around and say, well, 10,000 steps, or I could probably do some push-ups, or yeah, I need to join the gym, or I saw that IndieFit does the best outdoor fitness session in Shrewsbury, or you'll see things that they will just know what to do. But if you go up to those same 10 people and say, how do you lose weight? How do you fuel your adventure? Do you know what makes up the food that you eat and the impact that it has on the body? You'll get a lot of blank stares. And it's my job to help deconstruct and demystify that, because it is a simple process to understand. The unfortunate part of it is it gets vastly overcomplicated by social media. So when it comes to preparing our body, and I will round this little rant off now. When it comes to preparing our body for that overall adventure, the first most important thing you need to do is have a goal at the end of the line, because that is how you specifically adapt to whatever it is that you want to do. It's exactly the same as going into the gym and thinking, I need to get fit. So you do some bicep curls, and you might do some squats, then you might go for a swim, then you might go and get on the treadmill, then you do this, that, and the other. You will adapt to that, but a small amount to each individual level. Whereas if you thought, I need to climb Snowdon and I need to build my leg strength, so I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do some squats, I'm going to look at Bulgarian split squats, I'm going to build my glute strength, so I'll do some lunges, I'll get on the Stairmaster and do some steps, I'm going to do this, that, and the other that is specific to that goal. That means you're not wasting your time. Crucial, because we don't have time. Everybody is strapped for time. So you need to make that time work for you. When it comes to nutrition, you will know, people listening to this will know what foods are not necessarily good and bad, but what will have more of a nutritional benefit to us than others. There is always, and I'll be the first to say this, there's always a time and a place for a McDonald's breakfast. There's always a time and a place for an Easter egg. There's always a time and a place for an almond croissant. The difference is, it's not every day. The difference is, all the other time around that McDonald's breakfast, the almond croissant, and the whatever, is you're eating plenty of fiber, plenty of fruits and vegetables. You're upping your protein. You're focusing on protein. We don't need, notice I haven't mentioned carbs and fats here. We don't need to worry about them. They will sort themselves out depending on how you like to eat, and as long as you're within some form of structure to make sure that you're not under or overeating. Once you have done that, the important thing here is to make sure you're sleeping well and managing stress. So I know that was a long answer, but in terms of preparing yourself physically and in terms of your capacity to do more work, you need to make sure that you're first of all not taking on too much to do. You have a goal to aim for. You understand the movements that are involved in that goal, and therefore you can break them down into specific training plans. You need to fuel yourself well. You want to feel virtuous when you're eating, but also you want to reward yourself by just enjoying life and the fruits of the food that we have in this Western country. We do have almond croissants on tap. We do have McDonald's around the corner. There's a time and a place for them, but you want to make sure that on the whole, you are monitoring those things. And to top it off, sleeping well and managing stress. Because if you don't, if you forget those two, you forget your sleep, you forget your recovery. If you forget your sleep, you forget good eating habits. If you forget your sleep, you forget your drive to go to the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you forget managing stress, all the rest of it falls apart, because stress is that thing that gets in the middle of stuff. It's the grenade in the kitchen that goes off and just empties the cupboards. It's the thing that makes a mess of all of your perfect processes and progress. So managing stress and managing sleep are crucial to then managing your fitness and what you put in your mouth.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful framework to think about the different areas that we should be managing in our training. So let's dig a little bit more specifically. So we'll first do training and then a little bit on nutrition. So training, you mentioned. So say we've got our goal. It's we want to go and climb Mont Blanc, and we're not going to talk about anything technical here, but we're going to say that we've got our objective. Now, how do you, so we know it's going to be a lot of legs and a lot of kind of a base level of cardio that's going to be needed, or potentially a similar objective. But how would you then think about starting to break down the specific movements, and how would you think about putting them together in a program in terms of how many times should we be training a week? How long should the training sessions be? How much recovery do you think we need?
Perfect. Good question and a good case study. Now, I want to start this with a little story of my own. This I can use to call back on to answer your question. Back in 2017, I climbed the height of the Three Peaks Challenge up and down a 20-foot gym rope. I gave myself 10 weeks to fully train for it. And the goal was to climb this rope 738 times until I'd reached 110,000 feet, I think it was, off the top of my head. I can't remember. No, it wasn't, not 110,000. 11,500 feet, 110. 11,500 feet. The goal for that was I need to train to climb a rope. I was all right at climbing a rope. There was a lot of technique involved, but outside of technique, you've got to build that base strength. And this was a masterclass for myself as to how to break down that specific movement. You've got the initial pull. You've got the bringing the knees up. So you've essentially got a knee to elbow movement. Then you've got the squat and the pull, essentially, which is a bit like doing a squat with your feet close together to complete that movement. And then you stitch it all together into a rope climb. Now then, how I trained for that was breaking those down into 4 different movements. That was the initial rope pull. That was the knees to the elbows. That was the feet close together squat. And that was the overall rope climb to work in conditioning. Now then, as I trained for that over 10 weeks, that was structured in a training program, which I'll come on to in the latter part of the answer to your question. But I want to look at what we did there and apply that to Mont Blanc. So we need to understand, what is the goal? Mont Blanc, I'm going to be hiking up a hill. It's very leggy, yes, going to need to build legs. We're going to be crossing snowfields and glaciers. Okay, so there's slightly different terrain to be working on there as well. We've got cardiovascular fitness because we've got the added factor of altitude. So we need to be working on that to understand, well, how can I build my body to be able to adapt to that specific adventure? Now, when it comes to training frequency, most people will want to do one strength training session followed by a rest day, then a strength training session followed by a rest day. And you can fluctuate what part of your body that strength training session is targeting, so that you're not just absolutely hammering lunges 3 times a week for 10 weeks, for example. So as you're putting your program together, you're looking at Mont Blanc and going, well, I need to build my leg strength. But if I just build legs, what's the top of my body doing? If I have absolutely bulletproof legs, then the top of my body is going to turn into a limp piece of spaghetti. So I need to work on, well, what's the rest of the picture here? And this is something called your posterior chain. All of your muscles that drive forward motion, all of the legs, calves, ankles, joints, glutes, hips, core, the shoulders to keep your pack on, the arms that you're going to be moving. Are you going to have an ice axe in your hand? Are you going to have poles in your hand? That's a particular type of movement. It's the same with a runner. A runner is not just legs. A runner is all posterior chain, everything, including the core. And the majority of cases that I've had come in front of me and the people that I've coached, core has been the first place we've had to work on, because a lot of people's core strength is relatively low. And that's because, we sit in a box at work, we sit in a box at home, we sit in a box in the car, we go to a box gym, you know what I mean? We're always sat there and we're not overly using our core as much. So we need to build that up, because essentially if you build the core, you have a strong chassis for which the vehicle will then not collapse. Then we need to make sure the wheels are good. So we need to work on the legs. You're looking at building that motor pattern of stepping relatively high. If you go out inside your back garden, you've probably got a high step. It's a bit like stepping up on that and then stepping back on it, stepping back down and then back up on the opposite foot. That's your motor pattern. You could get away with adapting that particular training session just around that, because you're essentially building the specific movement of hiking up a hill. Now, when I went through the rope climb, you're breaking it down to several different movements, and then you're drilling that once or twice per week. When we're looking at something like Mont Blanc, you want to build your core, you want to build your legs, and you want to build your upper body to ensure that your whole body can handle the torque, if you like, of the legs as you're going up the hill. Now then, the other part of the rope climbing training was, once I'd broken down all of those movements, I then put them into practice by just doing rope climbing. And that's an important thing to remember within your training plan. Much like a runner would have a long run at the weekend, you want to have a long hilly hike. And it seems to be quite a favorite of, say, training for the uphill athlete and the rest of sort of organizations like that, where they are hiking up a hill with a big rucksack full of water bottles. You get to the top of the hill, you empty the water bottles, and you jog back down. And the reason that you're emptying them at the top is, if you're jogging back down or walking back down with a lot of weight, you're just putting more load through your knees and through your joints, which could lead to potential injuries in the future. We don't necessarily need to train the downhill part of the journey to Mont Blanc and back in this particular case. There are times for it, but not necessarily here. So here we can just find a hill, go to the long end with your rucksack, fill it full of 20 litres of water, hike it to the top of the hill with your poles. If you're carrying poles going up Mont Blanc, again, making this as specific as possible. Put your boots on. If you're going up Mont Blanc in your B2s, put your B2s on. If you can make this whole journey as specific as possible for that one session at the weekend where you're bringing everything, all the chess pieces together, then you're going to be setting yourself up for success. That's probably one of the most important elements of your training artillery, if you like, is having that one specific session per week. And that is where you put all of these practices into practice. Through the week before that, you're breaking it down to individual movements. So, for example, for Mont Blanc, we might be doing squats, lunges, and deadlifts in one session, where we're really drilling leg pressing capacity. The squat, how much weight can you lift off the ground on your shoulders, building your legs, your glutes, and your core. It's a compound movement that works multiple muscle systems. The lunge makes that squat more specific, because we don't just squat everywhere like a rabbit. We lunge everywhere like a normal human being. So a lunge puts a little bit more of added specificity into that specific movement. Coming onto a deadlift, you're building the lower back, you're building the hamstring strength, you're building your core strength, because it's a lot of core to keep your body straight and tight under a load of a barbell. If you build all of that into a session, that's a good session. Then on the next session, you're looking at specifically upper body. You're looking at your bent over rows. You're building your shoulders up. You're building your capacity to be able to hold weight without hunching over. You're building your core a lot. Your arm strength as well, because you're going to be pulling the bag onto your shoulder. There's a lot of different aspects to train for. The third session, you could be looking at then, once you've got that core and that upper body and that lower leg session, you could be bringing it all together in a full posterior chain training session, where you're also drilling your cardiovascular system. This is where you have more of like a CrossFit session, for example, or something a little bit more high intensity, where you are stressing the cardiovascular system more. Then on your fourth session, you're pulling it all together, you're getting your pack on, you're going to a hill. You will be drilling inadvertently, second order effect, your cardiovascular system, because it's hard work taking a heavy pack to the top of the hill and then jogging back down again, filling it up at the river, and then doing it again. You will drill your cardiovascular system. But crucially, you're putting everything into perspective. So I hope that's kind of answered your question in a roundabout kind of way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good framework. For the third session, when you mentioned a CrossFit-like session, that's kind of full posterior chain or full body. So it's for people that aren't familiar with that, what else, if they haven't been to CrossFit, what might that look like? It's kind of getting sweaty by doing full body exercises that aren't too heavy, right? For a kind of extended period of time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at your average boot camp. Look what a boot camp does or a circuit session. And the reason I have this third session in this particular example is if your leg session has been very effective, then you want to give your legs time to rest before you then go on to the specific session at the end of the week on a Saturday. If you've drilled your upper body well and your core well, you need to give that a chance to rest before the fourth session on the Saturday. Those are the three most important sessions. The fourth session is essentially your supplementary session. Now, let's say we did legs on Monday, we did upper body on Wednesday, and we're going to go out on Saturday for our long session. So on Friday, you could just do a session where you're looking at multiple different stations, going for time per station, and moving your body in multiple different ways. We're looking for different planes of motion. We're looking at, can we do bear crawls? Can we push a sled? Can we do something that's still specific to our specific training plan and to our goal, but it's just a bit more fun? It could be with friends. It's probably going to be sweaty. You want to get out of breath, and you just want to feel like you've had a bit of a workout. The reason for that is then when you go into your specific session on the Saturday, you're probably a little bit pre-fatigued, and that's why this session is optional. Because if you've had a heavy load on Monday and a heavy load on Wednesday, you could still be hooped by Friday, in which case take it as a rest day. But if you're feeling like you've got a bit of energy, and this again would be programmed specifically later on because you want to have an element of training fatigued on that Saturday. When you get to the Saturday and you're a little tired or a little stiff from doing push-ups or whatever the day before, then that's perfect. Because when you're halfway up Mont Blanc, that's hard work. You know, when you're going through the different stations, especially if you're starting from Sham rather than the top of the station, then you've had a long day to get there. You're already tired and you're not near the top yet. So you need to drill your body to be able to work under stress, under fatigue, and under load, so that it then becomes more specific and resilient to fatigue. Now, don't get me wrong, not every session on a Saturday, not every keystone session needs to be pre-fatigued. There are times where you're going to push yourself pretty hard on that Saturday session and therefore need to rest beforehand. But that's the beauty of having a very flexible and malleable training program. Again, this fits around your lifestyle, fits around your kids, fits around when you get up, fits around everything else that happens. But the point of that session is just having something optional to make you feel a bit fragged, to make you feel like you've been worked. And we mentioned earlier that I do outdoor fitness sessions. It's a bit like just joining something in a group where you can have a laugh with people and enjoy it, because a lot of your leg day and a lot of everything else might be done on your own. And it makes a heck of a difference when you can go and push yourself. That's why CrossFit's so popular. Go and push yourself in a community of people. Even if you're looking at doing Mont Blanc with 3 or 4 other people, getting together and doing something like that, downloading a workout from the internet and doing it together, that's going to be a really good help to keep you going. Looking at fitness that's transcending health rather, that's transcending just fitness and food. You're making yourself feel better. You're preparing yourself for adventure. And I mean, especially if you're doing the training with the people that you're going to Mont Blanc with, I mean, that's amazing, because you're then getting to the point where you've got that bit of banter as well. And you're getting to the point where you're fatigued together, working hard together, egging each other on, and just building that team cohesion together. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. What about LISS and HIIT? Is there anywhere in your training modality for low intensity, steady state? So a lot of people, I think, will be thinking, we have a load of people who go on all sorts of different trips with Call to Adventure, and some people who don't, but just let's say there's Joan, she's 40, she's thinking about doing the 3 Peaks Challenge, she's doing it with work, she doesn't really know how to do a squat or these compound lifts, and so she sees people at the gym and they're just on the treadmill or on the cycling machine. So is there a place still for some kind of low intensity steady state stuff in the gym for building that kind of zone 2, or do you think that they should really try to move away from that as quickly as possible and maybe get some tuition to try and help them learn those movement patterns, because they're going to miss out on all of the strength side if they're just doing that?
That's a great question, and I think a lot of people will find themselves in Joan's shoes. Now, look, if Joan chooses to go to the gym and just get on the treadmill and do stuff, or get on the cross trainer, or get on the bike, or get on the Stairmaster and just move, and doing that 80% low steady state intensity work, Joan's putting herself in a great position for success because she's doing more than nothing, which is great. Now, I always err on the side of caution of kind of encouraging people to change their training modality. Sorry, get my words out. Changing their training modality per se, because with change becomes a little bit of kickback. With change comes a little bit of resistance. Now, it would be fantastic if Joan found a PT and managed to build a little bit of strength and did some things. But Joan could also go on the treadmill, get off the treadmill, do a couple of air squats off the side of the treadmill and get back on it, and build a decent amount of training capacity just from doing the basics. Now, I'm talking about compound lifts here and doing squatting and deadlifting from a position of, I coach it and I help people to do it. It's not for everybody to just walk into the gym and sort of elbow some people out the way on the squat rack and then figure out what they're doing. It takes a lot of time to figure out how to do it. And there's a huge benefit to having coaching to this because it speeds the process up. But that's also the beauty of having a training plan or a training strategy that is periodized and is adapted to where that person's starting from. Now, let's say if we have Joan turn up and she's never trained before in her life, doesn't really know what she's doing, and she's gone to the gym and she thinks, right, I need to get my 3 Peaks Challenge, training up. In fact, I'm not going to even use Joan. I'm going to use a real life example. I'm going to use my mum. My mum's 57, she's asthmatic, and she did a 26-mile walk for Alzheimer's last year. It's the furthest she's ever moved in her entire life. She's a bit of a Trojan. She took up running, and she can do 5K. Now she can do 5K in under 30 minutes, but then she could do 5K in about 40 minutes. She's a little bit delicate in terms of lower back, potential sort of past injuries and things there, but will walk into a gym, scratch her head, and move off again because she doesn't like the environment, gets a little bit intimidated by the gym bros in the corner, doesn't know what she's doing, so just goes to Aquafit instead. Now, the fact that my mum here is still doing something means that she's on the right track. And it's the same with Joan here in our example. Now then, with these two people, what we've done there is we need to understand the specificity behind the goal. 3 Peaks Challenge is quite a lot of walking. You're looking at an average of around 12-ish hours of hiking, 12 to 13 hours of hiking, because they go off a staple of around 11 hours of driving to complete it in 24 hours. Now, that's a long time to be moving. So what we need to be doing there is, absolutely, throwing some low-intensity, steady-state work in there just to build aerobic capacity. We don't need to go straight into strength training. We don't need to go straight into steady-state training. But that's the beauty of how a coach works and how having a small understanding of the programming process works. You want to understand, where are we starting from? If Joan had already been doing a little bit of running and doing a little bit of walking and doing a little bit of hiking, then she's going to benefit most from starting off on strength. But that's not to say that Joan couldn't do a strength training session on Monday, go and do something low intensity on Tuesday, have a day off on Wednesday, do a strength training on Wednesday, do a low intensity on Friday, and then another low intensity or a specific session on Saturday. As much as that might seem like quite a lot of training, that's only 5 sessions in a week. And bearing in mind that the low intensity ones will be easy, i.e. going for a walk, getting steps in, doing an hour on a treadmill at a slightly fast pace for a hike, for example, or putting your pack on and just going for a walk to get used to carrying weight. All of these things have a place in that training program. Now, it depends on where that person starts from. For my mum, for example, she had a bit of a running history, so great, we can build strength and then we could build that walking capacity. And she was doing quite long and sort of fast hikes to build her up to that, and also test sort of asthma and the rest of it. But let's say that Joan has never stepped foot into any form of fitness, and she was coerced into it by the workplace to do this thing for charity, and all of her colleagues were joining her and just getting her to join, and she just said yes and did it, and now she's committed. Well, Joan's going to be in a good place now to just move. So like I said, if we went to those 10 people on the high street and said, you need to get fitter, what would you do? People would be like, I'll take the stairs instead of the elevator. Or maybe I'll park further away in Tesco's instead of right by the door. And you're building fitness by simply doing the easy things, the easiest things that you can change. Now, in Joan's case here, if she's got no training history, then yeah, get on the treadmill, walk. Why? Because you're going to be walking when you do the 3 peaks. The Billy basics of specificity. That's the best place you can start until she gets to the point where she's like, well, I can walk, I'm getting a bit of a jog on, I'm doing some bits and pieces. I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing. That's where she can ask the question, I think I need help. I'm now in that position of my mum, for example, before she did the hike. I've done some aerobic stuff and I feel like I need to do a bit more. And that advice could literally be, okay, do the same aerobic stuff, but do it up that hill over there. And keep doing it, and do that 3 or 4 times a week with a couple of easy sessions in. And she's like, okay, cool. And then Joan goes off and does that for 8 to 12 weeks. Brilliant. I'm really good at going up that hill now. Fantastic. Joan's doing amazingly well. Okay, brilliant. If Joan's motivated by that, bring her into the gym, take her to an outdoor gym, take her to anywhere that she can start to move a few things and start to build that strength, build that core strength. She can even build core strength at home by doing sit-ups, crunches, leg raises, planks, all these different things that we can do from home if she's intimidated by the gym. Because then we can then start to build and perfect all of that base training that she's done. So it is important to start from a base training session and to start from a base of aerobic strength. The two, strength and aerobic capacity, can be trained together from a starting point, or they can be trained differently from a starting point. But it entirely depends on the individual. It depends on their lifestyle. How much time have you got? Have you got time to train like an Ironman triathlete and do 13 hours a week? Have you got 0 time, in which case we need to make 3 hours a week incredibly specific? So it's a case of looking at what that person has in front of their plate rather than trying to thumb them into position of a set training plan, which doesn't work as effectively.
So we've got Joan taken care of. She is ready to go and ready to hit the 3 peaks. I just want to switch gears to a completely different case and just do a really quick case study on, let's say, a climber, Steve. He's keen climbing, been climbing for a year, keen climber. Now he wants to push his grades up into the 7s and is starting to think about some specific training for climbing. He's a little bit on the heavy side. So how would you kind of high level start to think about climbing specifically?
Okay, cool. Well, you've just said that Steve's a little bit on the heavy side. So whether that is muscular weight, i.e. he's a thick set guy, or whether that is body fat that could potentially be lost, a lot of higher end climbers, or those that can climb quite technical, weigh about as much as a wet bag of sugar. So potentially the weight loss phase is something to be concentrated on if Steve is motivated to do that and that's part of his goal. If it is, brilliant. Get the weight loss done and out the way first. You can do that through a variety of different processes. The overarching goal of weight loss is it's a calorie deficit. It's eating less, consuming less energy than you are expending. Now then, with the mathematics of that, you will then lose weight. The tricky side of that is finding a way that suits the individual, suits their lifestyle, and suits their training. Down to Steve's training, as he's in that weight loss process, there's no point Steve beasting himself like an absolute monster, because the calories burnt during exercise are so minimal that we don't even need to bother counting them. And exercise energy expenditure is 5% of our overall daily energy expenditure. So people need to switch off from exercising for weight loss when weight loss is done nutritionally, and the exercise is the cherry on top, as it were, in terms of perfecting that and getting you involved in the process of becoming a healthier version of you. In Steve's case, as he's losing that weight, then he's going to benefit from building his climbing strength, his specific climbing strength. And that's where we're looking at fingerboards. That's where we're looking at dead hangs. That's where we're looking at specific pulling motions. That's where we're looking at specific pushing motions. So we're looking at balance, coordination, flexibility. And all of these can be drilled at the same time that he's losing weight, because that isn't necessarily going to generate too much of an appetite, which is good. That means he's not necessarily going to overeat, and therefore the weight loss is going to be expedited. Once Steve has ticked the box on the weight loss, now he's looking at really diving into, okay, well, I can climb 6s pretty well. I need to start climbing 7s. And this is where Steve can start throwing into his training a breakdown of how to get to 7s. Now let's go on the same way as we did for the rope climb, same way as we did for Mont Blanc. Let's say that Saturday is the day that Steve can go to the climbing wall and do 7s. And at home, Steve has got a fingerboard, he's got a pull-up bar outside, he's got a few things that he can do. Well, in that case, then we're going to be breaking down that training plan so that he's doing those specific movements. There's a lot of pull-ups, pulling up movements. There's a variety of different pull-ups you can do. You can do archer pull-ups where you're putting more strain onto one arm than the other. So you're drilling that strength and coordination. All around this, Steve's doing a lot more flexibility, because flexibility is your friend when it comes to climbing quite harder grades, especially when it comes to those tiny moves or just spying out those small things to smear against, to push against, to get a leg up to 90 degrees in order to push against something. So the flexibility is going to be a really key part of him. In addition, with climbing, this is where those static hold strength exercises are going to be really, really good as well, because while you're fumbling around trying to find the next hold, these 3 fingers are crimping onto something that's the size of a tiny diamond on the wall and shaken away, but your arm's already locked, and that's an isometric hold. So when it comes to coming up onto a pull-up and doing a hold, you're then holding that position. It's a specific move for that particular point. A plank, a side plank, a twisting side plank. All of these are specific moves that are going to help generate tensile strength in Steve's body, because Steve needs to be an acrobat, a gymnast, a strength athlete, and an absolute cardio monster in order to become a great climber. In order to do that, Steve needs to get very good at doing easier grade climbs one after the other. So he's just building a little bit of capacity and building a little bit more specific skill. It's that technical element. You know, you're warming up on 4s, you're going on to 5s, you're coming on to 6s, you're trying some difficult 6s, you're going back to the easier 6s, and then you're topping off with a couple of trickier 7s. Maybe you're, going on confident 7s that you feel that you can get a couple of holds up, and then coming back to it, trying it again, trying to get the next hold, going with somebody else that you can watch someone else do it, get a beta on it so that you're getting that skill set available. You're then going to start to see in that specific session all the dividends that are being paid by doing static holds, by doing strength training, by doing pulling exercises, by doing all of that flexibility, Pilates and yoga, everything else that comes into that. And he's going to feel the difference if he's 4 or 5 kilos lighter.
Brilliant. I think that's a really, really useful framework for climbers to think about this kind of stuff. And I was going to ask you about training flexibility, but you did mention Pilates and yoga. Some other things that I've come across that are interesting that we don't have time to go into today, but if people are listening and interested, PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, it's pretty interesting stuff. If you want to do some more static stuff, there's a really good book called Stretch to Win by the Fredricksons. So that's an interesting resource. You mentioned before the calorie deficit. So just be thoughtful with that. And it's really important not to get too carried away. And a lot of climbers do suffer with eating disorders. So just be very, very thoughtful when you start to get into calorie deficit land. And I think you know much better than I do, Ben, but I've read that 300 to 500 calories is kind of enough in terms of a calorie deficit, and you don't want to be doing much more than that and losing 0.5 to 1% body fat per week-ish. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. You know much better. I'm not qualified. This is just things that I've read on the internet, bro. But I just want to make sure that people aren't, eating one apple and thinking that that's enough because they want to be in a calorie deficit.
You're absolutely right. There's calories become an ugly word with a lot of people. So does diet. and essentially, notwithstanding the word calorie is just a unit of measurement. It's like centimeters. You learn centimeters in school before you learn kilometers and miles. So when it comes to looking at a calorie deficit, people can take it too far because they think if I just put myself into a huge calorie deficit, then I'll just lose loads of weight. But then people aren't realizing that to an extent that does work. And I'm going to really stress to an extent, because I believe that if you're going to try a more extreme calorie deficit, that needs to come from a background of some form of knowledge or coaching to ensure you do it right. You highlight the right things. You are doing it under a guided process rather than fumbling around in the dark. For the vast majority of us, a 10 to 15% calorie deficit is pretty good, dependent on the goal that you're looking for. If you are an overweight individual, then you're going to be able to handle a larger calorie deficit and see a lot more weight come off immediately. If you're relatively slim, then it's more likely that you want to have a smaller calorie deficit because you haven't got that much stored energy to lose. Now, in addition to these calorie deficits, people need to be monitoring how much energy they're expending. A candle is only so long if you burn it at both ends. If you go for a big calorie deficit, but you're also exercising like a monster, something's going to meet in the middle and go wrong, because you're going to be burning tons of calories because you'll force yourself to do loads of exercise. You're getting up and you're doing 10K every morning, then you're doing a circuit, then you're doing this, that, and the other, and you're doing that day in, day out. But also you're in 1,000 calorie deficit. You're going to run out of energy. There's only so much you can drive a car on the red light, going back and forth to Tesco's, trying to get away with not filling up because fuel costs more than a kidney at the moment, until the car stops working or doesn't start in the first place. So when it does come to that as an overarching rule, you don't even need to look at calories. If people have a bad relationship with calories, and they do, and that's fine, tracking's not for everybody. It's a case of just addressing what you eat. If I could give one piece of advice to anybody trying to look at taking control of their nutrition, whether that's to put weight on and build muscle mass, whether that's to lose weight and shed layers of body fat, is to simply get a white piece of paper, a plain piece of paper, and write down every single thing you truthfully, and I'm going to highlight the word truthfully, eat every single day for 7 days, including the weekend. Start on Monday, start whenever, start today, whenever this podcast comes out, and you go all the way through the week and objectively look at yourself. And again, there's a lot of words I'm going to highlight here, but objectivity and integrity are the two main words. Because if you lie about what you're eating, if you just say, I'm not going to eat that cream egg, but I would usually, but I've got to write it down, so I'm not going to, you're lying to yourself. Get an understanding of the baseline information. Understand yourself as a project. Before you start that project, you've got to sit there and scratch your head and figure out what's going on. And writing down everything you eat for a week is that action of doing that. Because then, as you've gone through that and you have objectively looked at yourself, you can reflect on that week and go, I didn't realize I snacked so much. Didn't realize I had 3 hobnobs a day at 3 p.m. Interesting. Why do I snack at 3 p.m.? And you're objectively becoming your own coach. This is what I do with clients. I'm going to sit here and objectively look at you as a client, but you can do it yourself. Now, you don't have the accountability as such by doing it yourself, but think about what you're doing here. We're aiming for something called low-hanging fruit, the simple, easiest things that you can change right now, because the process of that is easy to do. If we look at turning the books out upside down and starting again from a fresh piece of paper, the likelihood is you're not going to stick to the intervention. But if you look at your week and go, right, okay, well, I ate 3 hobnobs on Monday, I ate 3 hobnobs on Tuesday, I finished a pack on Wednesday, then I bought a pack of bourbons. I'm oversimplifying this process, but we all snack, we all do things. If we are gaining weight, there are easy things that we can change here. But you're looking at that and going, right, well, instead of having 3 hobnobs every day, I'll just have 1, because, a cup of tea, dunk a hobnob in your cup of tea, that's quite a satisfying experience. So I don't want to take that away from myself. You've got to be compassionate with yourself. You look at that and go, right, I tell you what, I'll have 1 hobnob, and then at lunch, I'll have some extra fruit or some extra salad. We're adding food in rather than taking food away. I'll look at breakfast. Do I need to eat breakfast? Am I hungry? If I'm not hungry, don't eat breakfast. Breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. That's a myth. If you're not hungry, don't eat. If you are hungry, okay, what can I do to improve breakfast? What's one thing I can do to be better than yesterday? Well, I had porridges. I'll tell you what, I'll put some blueberries on my porridge. There you go. I've got a bit of fruit in there. The fact that you're adding things in, you'll inadvertently stop snacking later on in the day because you'll be fuller for longer. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and all of that can start from just writing down everything you eat every single day, everything you eat as you eat them. Don't recall it at the end of the day and be like, oh, I think I ate this and I think I ate this, because there'll be incorrections as you eat it. What did I have for lunch? Right, I've got lettuce in here, I've got some chicken, I've got some Caesar salad dressing. What's that? Tesco's. Okay, cool. And you're writing it down. Get to Sunday night, review, analyze, be objective, be compassionate, and be truthful to yourself. And then you can find the easiest things that you can change tomorrow.
All great tips. Yeah, I think writing it down on a piece of paper is a great way to do it. I am a fan of MyFitnessPal. If people like apps, I think it's a good way to do it, because it sends you reminders, and it's got a ridiculous amount of food on there. It's got like even Co-op's own pink Pacific salmon, and like you can find it down to that. That's genuinely one that I found today, and I was like, "There's no way this is going to be on there," but it is. So, and it's got all the nutritional information. Just helps if you want to start tracking that stuff and thinking about how many calories am I really eating? Am I getting in enough fat? Well, proteins. What we learned today. It's all about the protein. So I think we'll have to leave it there. I would love to keep picking your brain about all this stuff forever, but maybe we'll do another more in-depth episode, and maybe we could do a few special episodes on specific types of trainers and really go deep for Joan and Steve. But Ben, it's been awesome to chat. I think it's really cool, the adventures that you've got up to. Very inspiring message to get out there. And then I think even to give a bit of that kind of baseline advice on training, which a lot of people really struggle with, and they want to get out there, but they feel like training or nutrition can get in the way. And I think we've really managed to hit all parts of that trio. So thanks very much for coming on. If people want to find out a little bit more about you and IndieFit, where's the best place for them to go?
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me on. First of all, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love talking about this. People might be able to tell that I can talk for a while. And that's why I do lots of stage talks, is just because I can rabbit on about it forever. But for those who want to learn a little bit more, or just reach out, I am not somebody who will ever charge for an email. So please, if you have a question, just email it to me. You're not going to get forward to a robot. You're going to get forward to me on my phone at a time where I can give you a good response to a question that you may have. So in order to try and find me, have a look at Ben Turner Coach on Instagram, or IndieFit Coaching on Facebook. IndieFit, which is spelled INDE-fit.com, is my website. And yeah, I guess Instagram is probably where I'm most active. Facebook, I'm trying to do more. And then on my website, you can join my mailing list. That's a good place for me to be rabbiting on. But again, if you just need anything, if people have a question here and they just need to get a specific answer and they don't want to sift through Instagram posts, or they don't want to do anything else, either send me a DM straight away on Instagram, or just email me. It's ben.turner@indie-fit.com, and I'll answer your question. I'm not going to charge for questions. It's just a case of, if you have a question that needs answering, I want to be the one that gives you that answer. I want to be the one that's here to help you. So come and reach out to me. Come and have a chat. I am a friendly and approachable person, or friendly neighborhood nutritionist. So I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. Well, that's very kind of you. Well done. That's a great community service, and I will see you at one of your classes soon, and we'll have to go and
Let's do it.
Yeah, throw some tires over and run up some hills. So Ben, thanks again for coming on, and listeners, thanks for tuning in. So until next time, thanks very much. Bye bye.